Father, thank you for our time. We commit this session to you and ask you to watch over us and bless us as we seek to discuss these things in light of your word. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, the same pattern applies. Start with any questions that we had about this last Sunday's sermon, yesterday's sermon, and then we can expand from there to the previous sermons, and then we can expand from there, if you like, to absolutely anything that related to child rearing that you'd like to bring up. So, any questions?
This is maybe a softball. You realize you screwed up already. You say, suppose Kyle guilty of bad manners, and you snap out.
Right.
How do you stop right then and apologize and go forward?
Yeah. Okay. So I used the illustration in the sermon about a kid's playing with the potatoes with his knife and bad manners, and he's been told 50 times not to do that, and Dad bites his head off. And then let's say he gets a look from his wife, or everybody gasps, or he realizes 30 seconds into it, I'm going down the wrong road. Restitution should be as public as the sin was, and as immediate as it can be. So if the sin is a high-profile sin, and Dad catches himself, he should name the sin. Say, Billy, I was correcting you for the bad manners of playing with your potatoes with your knife, but I showed far worse a set of manners. My manners were far worse than yours by biting your head off like that. Would you please forgive me? And just straight up the middle. And then after that, you might feel like your moral authority is shot and gone, but is actually the opposite. Because what that does is it testifies, as few other things do, that your authority is under authority. So if they have to say they're sorry when they're wrong and they don't feel like it, and they see that you have to do the same thing, you're under authority just like they are, which means that they're not under the kind of authority that's arbitrary, capricious, and there's no appeal. If you just refuse to say you're sorry, if you refuse to apologize when you've wronged your children, that just tells them, I'm under an arbitrary tyrant, and I'm just going to start counting the days until I'm out of here. But if Dad humbles himself, you might think, well, I'm not, I had this correctable moment and I blew it because I sinned. What you're actually doing is teaching them how to repent. Right? And that's what you want from them. You want children who know how to repent. And they're not going to know how to repent if they've never seen it modeled. So if mom and dad seek forgiveness from one another, if they sin against one another, if someone's short and the kids saw it, it should be put right in the presence of the kids. If the kids didn't see it, you don't make an ostentatious display of it. You put it. You keep the security clearances have to do with how public the sin was. So if mom and dad got out of fellowship but the kids don't know anything about it, they get back in fellowship without the kids knowing. The kids never know that they were out. They never saw them get back in fellowship. But if they fell out of fellowship publicly, then you put things right publicly. And that sort of thing is potent. That kind of thing is potent. If you could probably have a discipline situation, 50 to 100 discipline situations, and your kid will have forgotten virtually all of them. But the time you apologize to them, the chances are pretty good they're going to remember that. They're going to remember that, and they're going to remember the lesson.
You might say something about mom and dad being in fellowship, and also about United Front while you're there.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that what you were going to ask?
I was going to ask.
Yeah.
All right.
Just that, not.
Why don't you go?
Well, I can just say that was just the way. That was the way we tried to do business. Was if we had any disagreement, it wasn't in front of the kids. It was later when they weren't around. So they never saw us out of fellowship with one another.
Your goal should be to have your kids be 15 or 16 before they start figuring out that you're actually two people. And we had a number of ways of dealing with that. We would deal with her if we had a disagreement. You don't ever want dad to start disciplining the child and mom undercut him from behind, or start making excuses for the child who's being disciplined, or the other way around. If, let's say, dad's disciplining one of the kids and mom disagrees, she should take it up with them as soon as they're alone and say, honey, do you mind if I talk to you about that situation? Sure. And then they talk about it, and she expresses, I think you were a little hard on him, or it seemed to me like you were losing your cool, or is that right? And they work it out among themselves away from the kids. But
And the same thing would go if Doug thought I had mishandled something.
right.
He would talk to me privately. He wouldn't correct me in front of the kids.
You back the other person's play at the time, whether or not you agree. And then you express your disagreement behind closed doors, come to an agreement on it, and then come out. And if it's a reversal, if you take the play up to the booth and they review it, and they review it up there, and then you come back and say, no, we're gonna have a reversal of that call, but both of you are reversing it together, and you're maintaining that united front. This should go without saying, but unfortunately we live in a time when things like this don't go without saying. I'm talking here about normal, ordinary sin problems with ordinary Christian people who are doing their best to do right by everybody. Occasionally, there will be times when there will be situations where the mother ought to defy the husband if the physical safety of the kids is involved. It's a sort of situation, if it's a sort of situation where she ought to call, her only dilemma is whether to call the police or the elders and in what order, then she can feel free to submissively defy her husband to protect her children. That sort of thing. But if you're just talking about, we're all godly Christians and we're trying to figure out how best to discipline our children, you back the other person's decision, and take up the disagreement when you have time later. Another thing we did in this realm is that when our kids were little, working mom against dad or dad against mom was a disciplinable event. So if you go to mom and say, can I have a snack before dinner? And she says no. And then they go to dad because he's an easy touch. He always says yes. Sure, have 6 Oreos. In fact, I'll have some myself.
Yeah, pretty much.
You want some milk?
But not if we found out the kid had asked the other person, they were in trouble
Right.
for asking the second time, no matter who it was.
And
Didn't matter.
In fact, it became a routine question. Dad,
you
can I have
asked-
this?
yeah.
Have you already asked your mother? Or Mom, can I do this? Have you already asked your father?
I was always more apt to say no than he was. Can you tell by the example? The Oreo example?
In regard to those sins behind closed doors that are handed down covenantally,
Yes.
can you think of some biblical examples that highlight that? Or some
Okay.
text? Do you have anything in mind?
All right, so the question is keying off of the point I made of about how a father with a secret sin, let's say, or mother with a secret sin, can be giving covenantal permission for the kids to sin the same way, even if they're not modeling an overt bad example to be copied. Like an overt bad example would be if dad smokes and the kid takes up smoking. It's hard to say no because you do it too. But what about if dad has a secret porn habit or that sort of thing? The scriptural basis I would appeal to there is in the Ten Commandments, where when it's talking about the sins of the fathers being visited to the 3rd and 4th generation, It doesn't say the visible sins of the fathers. It's the sins of the fathers are visited to the third and fourth generation. And as I've thought about this, this first occurred to me when in pastoral situations where a problem manifested itself in the kid, and I knew from previous history or a previous situation that there was a similar situation that the kid didn't know about, but which I did, and I thought, okay, there's a family resemblance, and there's not a visible thing for him to copy, and so I noticed that, and I thought of it in terms of covenantal permission, leaving secret passages and secret cupboards and that sort of thing unlocked in the house, and everybody lives there. This is all, the mechanism for it is speculative. I think the Bible teaches it, that the sins of the fathers flow downstream, even the non-visible ones. And I've seen this sort of thing played out. The mechanism for it might be this. So I'm just suggesting this, not asserting. But I think that we are connected beings, and that a lot of things that we think are part of our private lives are connected, have little chutes that go up above ground. And there are a lot of things that we do that we don't think are connected to that, but which are, right? So we think that's innocent, that's innocent, that's innocent, that's innocent, and this is my guilty secret down here. And the kids who are copying all the things that we think are innocent, self-justifying behavior, rationalizations, laziness, anxiety, that sort of thing, do get picked up on, do get copied, and then the underpinnings for that start to manifest themselves as well. That's one possibility. So I think it's connected to imitation and not just invisible zapping. I don't think it's, although I think God is the one who visits the sin to third and fourth generations, I don't think it's capricious. I think there's a logic to it. The other thing is, I think I said this in an earlier sermon, but to thousands of generations that love God. So the 3 and 4 generations is a mercy. It's a cutoff. It's a limitation. But it does flow downhill. So did I?
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you break that cycle? You know that you've sinned in the past. Obviously, repenting and turning from it is a large part of that. But what's
Okay, when you talk about the question is how do you break that cycle, and I would move away from you've sinned in the past. There are no parents who haven't sinned in the past, right? And so I would just appeal to, I think it's Psalm 25, remember not the sins of my youth. All right. So if you've sinned in some significant way or just a way that troubles you, and you've repented of it, then you have to. It is unbelief to drag that sin behind you like it's a ball and chain. And what's happening is that thing that you did back in college, or that thing that you did back when you were 17, that's all forgiven. But the thing that's dogging you now is the lack of trust in Christ when he promises forgiveness. And that's the thing that's going to trip up your kids, right? Right? So if you're just a bundle of nerves, or you're just all anxiety about, I don't know if I'm forgiven, and that comes out in all sorts of uncertainties. Your kids will not know whatever the heck it was you did in college, but they will know that you're a basket case day to day, right? And that's the thing that you have to get victory over. So you want to make sure that you're fighting the right temptations, right? So and I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in pastoral counseling, where the issue is not the issue. If someone is, let's say someone's introspective, right? Where it's morbid introspection. And the morbid introspection has to do with that thing I did. I got drunk once, or, I had a one-night stand or something, there's this thing that's dogging them back there. And they've sought forgiveness, they've gotten counsel, they've received forgiveness, that's dealt with. If God doesn't forgive sin, we're all hosed, and that's dealt with. The problem is not the sin you committed 10 years ago. The problem is always the sin you're committing right now. And it's more likely that the sin right now is trying to be the Holy Spirit, trying to convict yourself of sin, righteousness, and judgment, trying to be your own personal God. And your kids will pick up on that. Right? Does that make sense? And they will mimic or model, and this was the whole point of the sermon. My dad used the illustration. I heard him talk on this when I was growing up, but he said when I was a little boy, I was riding the back seat of our car. We were driving down Rowell Boulevard in Annapolis, where we lived, and Dad rolled down the window and spit out the window. And a few seconds later, he heard the window rolling down in the back seat. Oh, cool! look what I get to do. And so he said, "Okay, a lot's going on. There's a lot going on." Well, you've seen little kids pick up a block and talk on the, put it up like they're talking on the phone, or toddlers swiping a magazine trying to get get it to act like that. Where do they get this? Where do they get this stuff? Well, they're copying. They don't have anything to do all day long but to watch and copy and figure things out as they go. That's what they do. There was someone in the church who, a little girl, got a warning tap.
I don't think you should tell that story.
But it's a really good one. Okay.
Give you a bad idea.
I've been reeled in. You can go to sleep wondering. You tell it.
Oh, no.
Okay, next question.
Connected to both open sin and hidden sin in a covenantal sense. How do you? And I think you've talked a little bit about this in other places about going home for the holidays with family. But as a parent, how would you exemplify to your kids how to handle either grandparents or a close family that has issues, but they're very close family, so you don't want to disrespect them, especially if it's a granddad, or that kind of thing.
All right. So the question is, how do you teach children? Let's say you've got certain standards for your home, but those standards are not either shared or on display with extended family, and when you go to visit the folks or go to visit your brother and his wife, or how do you process it when the kids are suddenly exposed to some cousin action that's nothing at all like what they're used to, or that sort of thing? Is that the question? All right. So the first thing to say is that if it's an elephant in the room, kids have eyes in their head, and if the challenge is how do I teach them to respect Grandpa, they're going to have more trouble with respecting him if you say nothing about it. Because if you say nothing about it, they're just left with this clash of cultures, and they have to sort it out on their own or ask about some aspect of it. So if you have a time of debriefing in the car on the way home, now kids, do you know why we don't do it that way? Now we love Grandpa and Grandma, don't we? Right? And we respect them a lot, don't we? Yes, we do. But do you see that there's some things that they do that we don't do? I think there's a way of walking kids through that helps orient them, that helps teach them to salute the uniform where, they still honor their grandpa and grandma, or their uncles or whoever it is, while you're maintaining your standards.
I just thought of something kind of related, not totally related, but we taught our kids that they had to obey us, but they didn't have to obey adults in general. In fact, we didn't want them to obey other people necessarily, unless we had authorized someone, like a teacher at school, yes, obey your teacher, or a babysitter, we have delegated this, obey the babysitter. But just if some person at church told them to do something or not do it, or a neighbor, which happened to some of my grandkids at our house, was yelling at them to get out of the alley, which they were perfectly fine to be there in the alley. And when they told, I guess it was probably, I don't know which family it was, but they told her parents that she had been yelling at them, and my daughter said, "So what did you do?" They said, "Oh, nothing. She's not the boss of us." So we taught our kids, they are not your boss. So just random adults sometimes get bossy with other people's kids and say, don't do that or whatever. And so anyway, it's just a protection for your kids. And so adults in general are not in authority over them. It's kind of nice, freeing for them. It's just like women are not submitting to men, it's wives to husbands. And it's very freeing. Did that relate to anything?
Yeah. Yeah, basically, your kids need to know what the line of authority is, who they need to obey, who they need to copy, who they need to not copy, and who they love and respect and obey, who they just love and respect, and who they just love.
And it may be even with grandparents. It could be grandparents, and the kids just say, "Well, I'm going to go ask my parents." They say, "Oh no, it's fine, it's fine." It's like, "Well, I'm going to go check anyway." That's great. That's good.
Right. One other thing is, and some, actually, I'm glad I remembered this. There are some parents who think that the way out of this bad jam is, I don't want my kids to be brought up the way I was brought up, so I'm gonna sort of pull away from my family. We're not going to go visit for Christmas or Thanksgiving, and we're not going to. And this goes back to the previous point I made, where some situations are so horrendous that, you shouldn't go visit. But we're talking about normal, civilized human beings here. We're not talking about whether you go visit, Hell's Angels for Thanksgiving. It's your folks. Well, some Christians, especially if non-Christian grandparents, Christian parents, they got converted in college, and they say, we're going to pull away from our parents so the kids don't have this bad influence. Well, what the kids are seeing to imitate is distance between parent and child. That's what right? So when you run into trouble, when you run into difficulty, what's the response? You pull away. Oh, that's what we'll do when we run into trouble with you guys, is we'll pull away. Well, you want to model, I would say, model for your children what you want them to be doing for you. All right? You want them, when they're 30 and you're 60, do you want them to put a priority on getting home during the holidays? Well, the best thing in the world you can do is model that for them. And you say, well, it's so hard to get home for the holiday. I'm busy, and it's the whole cats in the cradle thing, So model for them what you want them to be doing. And of course, there are limits and there are things, sometimes people just make it impossible, but it really should be impossible.
A general question. Family worship. I've heard some people kind of say, must do this, and other people, I think Toby recently said something about, don't let that be overwhelming you or something. How do you decide and make decisions on
Okay, the question's about family worship, and I guess what we did for family worship, what we'd recommend.
Yeah, what would you recommend?
I would recommend predictable, stable, and not too tight. Okay, so we never had what I would call family worship. When I think of the phrase family worship, I think of a worship service. You know, where you have defined liturgy and you have it
Singing and prayer
you-
and Bible.
the invocation and
yeah.
then the offering. Well, and it's like a little toy church, like a little mock church, and it might be 10 minutes or half an hour, but that's what I think of when I think of family worship, where it's very defined and there's a set liturgy and stuff. And we didn't really do that. At the same time, we had a pretty predictable routine in the family, and we did a lot of talking about Bible and a lot of reading and that sort of thing. And generally what we did, and this varied, but this was the general pattern, is between dinner and dessert, there'd be some sort of reading. So sometimes Bible, sometimes a catechism, sometimes a little book, Leading Little Ones to God, sometimes a Narnia story. You know, it could be any number of things. So in between dinner and dessert was our time.
We didn't have dessert every night. Did we? Maybe we did.
I think we pretty much did. Yeah, it was ice cream.
Love
So
ice cream.
Nancy would get up to go serve the
Yeah,
ice cream,
right.
and we would start talking about something, or I remember different books we read.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we would have a lot, and this was also in the dinner table discussion, was a debriefing time for what happened at school that day. So what happened on the playground? What did Mr. So-and-so say? What happened in the class? Who got
Or
sent to the office?
theological
Or theological
things,
questions?
All kinds of stuff.
What did God stand on when he made the world? I don't remember that being ours, but
What he's saying is, it was a Christian home, and we prayed and we read to them and we had a lot of fun, but we didn't have a set time or a set. It just was
I think if you asked,
organic.
I think if you asked our
just-
kids about it, they would say, "No, that wasn't family worship. That was dinner."
Yeah. It was,
You know, it was all just part of dinner. We talked and prayed, and the other thing we did is we had a ritual putting the kids down
When they were little,
When they
yeah.
were little, we'd put them to bed. So we'd pray with them. I'd take my guitar into the room and sing a few songs with them,
yeah,
and
but it was like Eric Clapton. I mean, it wasn't hymns. It was just fun.
well, it was fun stuff.
It was probably some spiritual songs, but I mean, it was just
Right.
like silly songs, or what is that? One of Rachel's? Isn't that Eric Clapton?
Yeah, oh, little Rachel.
Oh, little Rachel. Oh, because Rachel. You know, I mean, it was just there, or Summertime and Living's Easy, and just fun, lots of fun songs.
And then
Holy, holy, holy.
and we'd sing scripture
Yeah.
songs as well. But that was we'd sing and then put
Yeah.
them to bed and pray with them, and
Yeah. Lots of both. And in the cars, you know, singing all kinds of songs.
Right.
Lots of scripture songs and silly songs.
Anything else? Another question?
Well, we're asking general questions.
Yes.
What is your guidance on dates? One-on-one time, father, child? Just that child?
Yeah.
Just the father?
All right. So this is the question has to do with daddy dates, or dad, basically dad taking the kids out on dates. When we it's hard for me to gauge from this distance what the ratios were, but generally when the kids were little, Saturday morning was my time to take the kids out. So that would give Nancy time off. She would stay home, and I would take the kids as a group. We had three, so I would occasionally take one on a date somewhere, going to do something, but usually it was me and the kids would go would go off and do something.
They usually involve donuts and the library and Moscow Mountain.
Moscow Mountain,
Yeah.
donut shop, library.
Yeah.
There were a few other things we'd go and do. Just go spend time, and it was a breather for Nancy to get things done. Because when I took the kids out, generally the house stayed calm. When Nancy went out,
I would find socks everywhere.
Well, that's because I have to explain a game we had. Yeah. This game, I would have the kids pull out a sofa. It was a shooting gallery game, sort of. I would have the kids would go gather up every pair of socks in the house, and they were all rolled up in a little ball. And I would sit in this chair across the room, and then the kids had to walk behind the couch with a slipper on their head. Yeah. And the game was to see if I could knock the slipper off. And that was such a blast. It was a great game. But then Nancy would come home and there'd be
They put them away, but I would find them.
Socks under
for a long time.
this and that and the other thing. But it was no damage. You can't really hurt anything.
right.
It's and they had to walk slowly and deliberately, and their goal was to make it all the way across with the slipper still on their head. So I
would-
recommend it highly.
Oh yeah, it's a good one. And he could just lie on the couch while he did it. But the
And
other
then,
thing,
then we were over, that round's over, and then the kids would go gather up all the socks and deliver them, reload the cannon. And
his day off, he had a great day off.
so when I took the kids out,
Yeah.
Nancy's house would stay clean and calm and everything.
But I would say he coached softball for the girls teams. He started the lacrosse club at Logos when Nate was in junior high. What else did you coach? Anyway, he did it. It was not exactly one-on-one, but so that wasn't on the calendar like this week. But we did do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just not planned
And
necessarily.
then I did what Ben is doing now with Ben started our
Junior
son-in-law.
high.
He started a junior high Bible study. I did the same thing when our kids hit junior high. I started a junior high Bible study so that I could, as a pastor, we made a rule early on that I wasn't going to be away from home in the evenings for more than 3 nights a week for events or Bible studies or that sort of thing. So I knew that I was going to be home for 4 nights out of the week. And then we tried to parlay any of those 3 events into things where I would be with the kids. So one of those 3 would be with the high school Bible study that I started that the kids were in. So I would go off to this event, but the kids would go with me. So we.
And jammy rides.
Oh
Jammy
yeah,
rides.
jammy rides are another thing we used to do. Jammy rides were when the kids were smaller, elementary school age, is we do the normal bedtime thing, singing and praying, put them all to bed, and after they'd been in bed 10 minutes, we'd go out into the living room and I'd yell jammy ride, and everybody would have to hop up and go get in the car, and we'd then go out to Baskin Robbins or something, and or visit the grandparents, or we just go do something with them and their jammies, and then we take them back home and put them to bed. And so you just want to make it fun,
But nothing magical about spending or making a concerted effort to spend one-on-one time
I would say.
with each kid, with each child.
Yeah, I would say that's probably something where you'd probably, if we
Numbers
didn't.
was-
Depending
just
on the
had
number of
3.
kids you had, we had three, and they were 2 years apart, and it was very easy for me to get to know them all well, and it was a small group, and we had 2 girls and 1 boy, and it was very doable. I can easily see if I had 7 children or 8 children, I could see an obligation for a father to make a point of singling kids out, because you get to a certain number and somebody's going to get lost in the shuffle. and you just don't want to be dealing with that kid who you don't even know
And
her
we
name.
would take one with us. You know, if I had to go somewhere, I might take one this time and another the next time. And so we did that. I just don't think it was organized. And the other thing is, Doug started Logos for our kids. And so for many years, his office, was his pickup truck out in front of the school. So he would be in helping teach their classes. And then later when we moved to the building where it is now, his office was in there for a long time. And then I started teaching, and so we were all going there together. You know, we just saw a lot of each other.
Here go
and
the
we're
Wilsons.
Involved in it. We call it snoopervising, you know, where we're there for everything. And so we were.
Another thing, this was when the kids got older, and this was basically, it really came online in high school and then over in college. We wanted our house to be the fun house. We wanted our place to be the congregation point. We wanted our kids to have the liberty to bring their friends over and to just show up, and that involves food, that involves activities, that not organized activities, but a safe place, a safe haven for the kids to come and hang out and just have it be a good place for doing that. So we always made a point of wanting, not insisting you must stay home or it's got to be here, but having it be the kind of place where the door was open, and it's the sort of place where the kids would want to have it be there.
Fun times. Those were really fun times. We had a basketball hoop in the backyard, one of those freestanding ones, and then Nate got one of those little trampolines and put under it so that he and his friend could run and jump on that thing, and boy, they could dunk. Then they could. They completely wore it out. Yeah, it works very well.
Another question.
And he broke all the windows in that house with football, baseball, lacrosse ball.
And in one case, an apple.
They were old windows.
You're obviously very productive. You get a lot of things done, and I think I've heard you before talk about not bringing your work home.
Mm-hmm.
What were the mechanics of that? Did you just stop completely? Did you let the kids go to bed and then you do something, or I'm just curious.
Okay, there are a couple of things. One is that I've wrote a blog post one time on time management, and basically I believe in plodding, chipping away, just doing a little bit adds up. But to put this in perspective, I'm 60 now. And I've written a bunch of books and I write a lot, but my first book was published when I was almost 40. Right, so we saw the time when the kids were little as plowing and planting. You know, we spent a lot of time with family, cultivating that relationship with the kids, because we saw that as sort of our fundamental qualification to be doing what I wanted to be doing in the first place. So it's easy when people, you know, let's say someone moves to the community here and they see me blogging on the internet. Well, there wasn't an internet. There were no iPhones. There wasn't an internet. There was no Twitter.
We didn't even have a computer.
We didn't have a computer. And so there was a lot of, basically we did a lot of upfront investment in family and people, and it was reading in the evenings, it was coaching the kids' teams, it was me taking them on dates, there was just a lot of human activity. One of the things I wrote in Wordsmithy is that you have to, if you want to write, you have to have lived a life. Well, there was a good 20 years of, 15 to 20 years of building a school, teaching my kids, doing Bible studies with the kids, coming home to the kids, And a whole bunch of the stuff that I'm currently doing, I was not doing. I was getting ready to do it, and I wanted to do it. So I remember vividly part of our game plan that we tentatively had it before the Lord is that we thought Moscow is a great place to bring up kids. We want to bring up our kids here. And that's the priority. We're going to bring up our kids. We want an intact family. And I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, and we were seriously thinking of, all right, let's get our kids through high school, and then we'll move to the East Coast or do something where I wanted to make a dent, and I wanted to get involved, and I wanted to get in the fray, and all of that stuff. Well, by the time my kids were in high school, desktop publishing had arrived, and we started Credenda, and we started doing a number of things, and I realized, we can do a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do. We can do it from here. But that came later. That was sort of act 2, right? Does that make sense? So when you plod, when you chip away at it, here's the other thing, is when you look at the Puritans, John Owen wrote a commentary on Hebrews that's like 7 volumes, commentary on Hebrews, in 6 or 8 point font, whatever it is. And the first 2 volumes are the introduction. So John Owen is this exhaustive, and then I think, what would the Puritans have done with word processors? What would they have done? What would they have done with the technology that we have now? And I look at things like that, and I look at Calvin's commentaries on the Bible, and then I look at what Calvin did, and he's out in the streets of Geneva breaking up fights and advising the city council on this political issue, and he's distracted by medical problems and all that. And I sometimes wonder why God didn't give Calvin a well-stocked library and a big stack of blank paper so that he could just write down all his wisdom. Well, the answer is, if God had put him in an ivory tower like that, he wouldn't have had anything to say, right? You need real people, real life, real time, and basically the glory of young men, as it says in 1 John, is their strength, but their glory is not their patience. And I was chafing when I was younger, wanting to, let's get on and do something important. But I learned from my father that family is a fundamental qualification, fundamental importance, and 90% of what I'm doing now, I was not doing then. I was preaching then, like I'm preaching now, but I wasn't blogging, I wasn't writing books, I wasn't, I was investing in the kids. Does that make?
Starting a school. You were
Starting a
doing
school, yeah.
lots of board meetings.
There were board meetings.
When the school moved into the roller rink, they had to completely redo it, obviously. So we have times we call hunker down times, and that was one of them. But he got home one night at 11, and I remember saying, "Wow, you're home early." I thought, "Oh, that's weird," but he was home early. It was a hunker down time. But when the kids were growing up, the 3 days a week rule, he was still home for dinner. It just meant he had events in the evening.
If you go in the lunchroom at Logos, that tile, the 4 blue squares, and I laid that. And I remember standing after one evening, laying all that tile, looking across that room, big empty room, thinking how enormous it seemed. This room is huge. How are we ever going to fill it up? And now it's this little dinky, little dinky thing.
But he and Nate also built our house, most of our house together, and they did that in summers. Nate was like 8th grade or
Starting in 8th grade.
10th grade. It took us a while, but so that was a lot of
That was the shop class.
one-on-one.
The shop class that neither of us had ever had.
That's right.
Which led to some interesting scenarios.
Yeah. But Nate can build anything now. Because of that.
Yeah, and working with Nate on the house was working on Nate, working with Nate was an investment in him. Yeah. Another question. We have time for one or two more. Yeah.
What about when you're having family or friends over, and when it's just you, your family, you try to make a concerted effort for that dinner time to be really fun, you chat with your kids, everything. And when you have company or family, they're not used to that, and they're just talking all on the adult level, and the kids get kind of left out, shoved to the side, ignored. How do you deal with that?
Okay, so that's a great question. So let me see if I've got it right. So when it's just you and your family, everything seems to run smoothly, and the kids are included in it. Kids are included in it. But when you have another family over, then it can immediately go up to the adult level, and the kids are left out. First, I don't remember what we did.
I'm glad if I don't either.
That's the first thing. But let me act like I do.
I have no idea.
With the advantage of hindsight.
I know one thing we did.
Okay, good.
Sometimes, if they were really little and we were having company, we had them over later, and we fed the kids and put them to bed, or we had them in an activity or something. Other times, I think we didn't have so many people that they were excluded. Also, our kids were not shy, so we probably included them, I think, because I don't remember.
Right.
There were obviously times where it was over their head, and I think that was probably good for them too.
Sure.
It's just a balance. If it's all one way all the time, maybe that wouldn't be good if you had people all the time, but if it's just occasionally.
If it's adults that you have over and they don't have kids, then
Yeah, they
that's
tend
the
to
sort of
be-
thing where
yeah.
we probably would have fed our kids early and just had an adult dinner where we could visit with them and the kids could play or do something like that. If the family is visiting, if they have kids, one of the things you can do is set it up so you have a big general chatter time. You eat, the kids are excused, the adults can visit for a while, and then you call the kids back for dessert. That kind of thing where everybody gets a shot. The other thing is, I would think, is if you would like to involve the kids in the dinner table conversation, the best way, I think, would be not to try to showcase your kids, but rather to draw the visiting kids out. Ask them questions about, how's your schoolwork, or what do you study, what are you reading now, or that sort of thing. But and we see that it's cousins, so it doesn't count. We see a lot of this now with our Sabbath dinners. Our kids have 16. We have 16 grandkids, and so they come when they all come, and when the times when we're all sitting at the same table. Frequently, the kids will go after the main course and go downstairs and run around and play for a while, and then they're called back when dessert's ready. And kids take that sort of thing in stride. All it has to be is predictable. Did we address that? So. Uno mas, as
You know that book, To Train Up a Child?
who wrote
It's
Pearls?
Is that Rod and Staff Publishing? I can't remember who wrote it.
It's
Is it
a
the
have
Pearls?
a horse and buggy on the
Yeah, it's
front.
got the horse and buggy
Yeah.
in the front.
Michael Pearl.
Pearl. Okay. Yes.
Read it a long time ago, and not a lot stuck with me. But one thing for sure did, and that was he gave the example of training the children or disciplining them is not just when they do something bad, you punish or you discipline them. But he suggested that you do it as a learning experience, like you're training an athlete. So if you have a 1-year-old who needs to learn how to come here, then you need to set aside some time in the evening maybe to practice with the kid and have him come here when you say come here, and if he doesn't obey, then you spank him. And I wondered if that's setting up your child. I can see it working, but I wonder if it's setting up your child to sin, as we've talked about before in a couple sermons ago.
I can see it working with Labrador retrievers.
That's exactly the kind of
Right.
thing.
So it's been.
But his goal is to get them to obey
Yeah.
without question.
Well, of course. So here, this is the thing. It's been a number of years. It's been a couple of decades now, I think, when the Pearl book was making the rounds in our church, and I don't remember a whole lot about it except that we were concerned and didn't really like the flavor. Okay, and the flavor, and I'm talking generally here because I'm not well versed on. I can't pull out the book and show you. I might want to refute everything about it if I read through it closely, but it's been many years and stuff. So I'm talking at a pretty high level, and I would say the same thing is true of the EZO. There was an EZO method, training children raising children God's way, or something like that. The EZO method and the Pearl method were both big at the time, and we were wary of both of those things, and without attributing any kind of motives to the people involved. It came across as power tripping. Sort of look at what I can get my kid to do. If I say sit, I want you to sit. If I say come, I want you to come. And even if the motives are right and it's not actually power tripping, it can come across. If it can come across to others like that, it can certainly come across to the kid like that, right. And so some of the suspicions, and again, this is not all footnoted, but some of the suspicions I had about the overly strict instant obedience when I say the way I say, and let me
And scheduled all out.
schedule everything all out, has 20 years later, when the kids and the parents are not on speaking terms, they can't communicate. Well, that's the fruit of that. So discipline, in Hebrews 12, discipline yields the peaceful fruit of an upright life. So the end result of discipline ought to be peace, harmony, joy, good relationship, laughter. That should be the fruit that you're aiming at. And when you're too focused on tight obedience now in every detail, it's very hard to keep that balanced. And
Joyless.
even when you want it to be balanced, and even if someone said, "Oh no, we want it," someone who's following that method would say, "Oh no, we want it to be balanced." Yeah, but it's not enough to want it to be balanced. You want it to actually be balanced. So one scenario, there was a situation some years ago. This was after our kids were grown, and we even had some grandkids. There was a situation where we were sitting down for dinner, and some of our kids were over, and we sit down, and there was a little girl whose mom was picking her up, and she had to wait by the door. We weren't shunning her or excluding her or anything, but she had to wait for her mom to. So we were off having our dinner, and she was by the door, and her mom came and picked her up, and then we heard back via the mom what her impressions were of our dinner table conversation, and her report was, "Mom, they laugh." It's just dinner of just laughter, just telling stories and laughing, and that's what you want. Mom, they laugh. This is a good time, and if you're so focused on do what and I don't want to come across like we don't care about obedience or we don't care about strict obedience, because we do, but everything has to do with, is this a gift? Am I demanding something from you, or am I giving something to you? Right? If I'm giving you the gift of obedience, that's open-handed. If I'm demanding something, if I'm doing a drill sergeant thing, I think it's very easy for that to go off the rails. Any last questions?
Just to tag on to the back end of that, you talked about with small children in church, maybe having a practice session where let's sit still for 10 minutes. How would you make a distinction between practicing sitting still for 10 minutes and practicing coming, you know.
Oh, this is the difference. I think it's a good idea to practice, and I think it's a good idea to practice coming and practice sitting and practice throwing a ball, whatever. But when you practice, it should be a game, right? It should not be a live fire boot camp
Spanking
thing,
and-
you know, spanking. You know, no, come on. You know, it's training. If it's training, I've seen our kids doing this with their kids, where they say, "Okay, we're going to play the obedience game now." But it's a game, and the kids love it. But if they say, "We're going to run you through the obedience drill, and we're going to spank you as hard as we would if it were a real situation," that's a live ammo boot camp thing, and I just don't like it.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.